She's been locked up in an abandoned storeroom for 15 years. Just 6 years old when her wicked stepmother threw her into the dusty room. No food, no water, no change of clothes, just pain, silence, and darkness. But when the door was finally opened 15 years later, everyone gasped. What did they see? And why was she locked away? Find out in this shocking, emotional story. Subscribe now and watch the full video. You won't believe what happens next. The full video.
Since Chioma could remember, she was her father's world, his heartbeat, his sunshine, his little queen. He called her my angel from heaven. And she believed it, because truly, life with him felt like heaven. But one thing always confused her. Her mother. Everywhere in the house, her mother's photo was hung like a national hero. The smiling woman in the frame wore a red gown and pearls, her eyes soft like a storybook queen. But nobody ever talked about her, not even the maids. It was like a secret everyone had signed to keep. Each time Chioma asked, her father would go quiet. Then tears would fall, real tears, heavy ones. He would hold her close, whisper things to the photo and kiss it like he was kissing the sky. That silence became the loudest part of her childhood. But everything changed on her 5th birthday. She had just finished blowing out candles when her father carried her up and kissed her forehead. "You're growing too fast," he whispered with a chuckle, hugging her tight. And that was when the door creaked open. A woman barged in like she owned the land, dragging 2 heavy bags, wearing lipstick that shouted louder than her voice. Behind her was a small girl, maybe 3 years old, chewing on a biscuit and dragging a stuffed bunny with one eye missing. "Hello, Calvin, my love," the woman announced, flipping her wig like she was in a movie. "I've come to take my place in your life. Finally!" "What?" Chioma's small heart nearly jumped out of her chest. She expected her father to scream, to yell, to say, "Get out of my house, you witch!" But instead, he froze. No word, no movement, just silence. A long, awkward silence that even a cricket would have found uncomfortable. Chioma blinked. She looked at the woman, then at her father. Maybe this was a prank? But her father didn't laugh. He didn't say, "I don't know this woman." He didn't push her out. He just stood there like a broken statue. The woman, clearly not waiting for permission, smiled and said, "Don't worry, darling. I cooked a goosey and pounded yam. Let's have a family dinner tonight." Family. Chioma's 5-year-old brain couldn't process it. Just like that, a new woman and her mini-clone walked in, and the door to her peaceful life slowly shut. That night, the woman moved into the master bedroom. Her daughter took over Chioma's playroom. And Chioma? Well, let's just say her fairy tale story quietly ended, without a closing line. But hey, at least they didn't send her out of her beautiful bedroom. That still make her feel like a queen. 1 week later, the mansion no longer smelled like peace. It smelled like burnt stew, strange perfume, and something Chioma couldn't name. But it wasn't good. Everything was different now. Her toys were gone. Her favorite cartoon CDs had disappeared. And suddenly, she wasn't allowed in the master bedroom anymore. Even the dog Bingo now barked at her like she owed him money. But that night, everything changed again. It was past bedtime. Chioma had tiptoed downstairs to drink water. As she turned to head back up, voices came floating from the kitchen. Loud voices. Her father and her, the new woman with the long nails and big mouth. Chioma paused by the wall and listened, heart beating fast. "I'm done talking, Calvin," Amaka snapped. "You have to change everything to my name, the account, the house papers, even the company cars." Chioma froze. What did she just say? Her father's voice thundered back. "No way, Amaka, that can't work. I can't do that. I can't let her memory die just because you walked in here and called yourself Madam." "Excuse me?" Amaka hissed, offended. "I am your wife now, in the flesh. Not some woman in a photo frame hanging all over the house like a ghost." Chioma's eyes widened. A woman in the photo frame? Could she be talking about my mom? I respected your late wife for years, Calvin, Amaka continued, but she's dead, finished, rotting in the ground. I'm the one here now, breathing, cooking, sharing your bed, not her. Chioma gasped quietly. She had never heard her father so angry. Don't you dare talk about her like that, he shouted. Do you know how much I loved her? That woman gave me life. She gave me Chioma. You think because you waltzed in here with your suitcase and your coconut-head daughter, I'll forget her? Never. Oh, so I'm a coconut now? Amaka laughed bitterly. Okay then, keep worshipping a dead woman. One day you'll wake up and find yourself alone. Don't say I didn't warn you. A sharp sound followed, maybe a glass, maybe a slap or a plate. Chioma couldn't tell. But one thing was clear. Something had broken. And it wasn't just the kitchen plate. It was the beginning of war. But for Chioma, that night was unforgettable, because it was the first time she heard anything about her real mother, a mother who once lived here, who was loved deeply, and who now lived only in silence and picture frames. And from that moment, Chioma realized something painful. This house was no longer her home. The next morning, the mansion, which once echoed with music and laughter, now felt like a graveyard. Silent, cold, tense. Chioma sat on the edge of the dining chair, waiting. She kept glancing at the stairs, hoping her father would come down and smile at her like he used to. But the chair at the head of the table remained empty. No footsteps, no smile, no daddy. Amaka walked into the dining room like a queen whose crown was on too tight. She wore a wrapper, messy hairnet, and her face was twisted like she chewed bitter leaf without swallowing. Behind her came Nena, bouncing around in Chioma's old slippers and dragging Bingo by the ear. Chioma looked at the table. Nena's plate was filled with fried plantain, egg, golden bread and juice. Chioma's side, empty, not even water. She cleared her throat softly, then said in a gentle voice, "Mummy, my food?" Amaka turned like she was waiting for that moment. "Oh, so you're still here? I thought you vanished with your ghost mother overnight." Chioma blinked in confusion. "Please, I'm hungry." Amaka let out a loud sarcastic laugh and clapped her hands. "Hungry? Then go outside and join Bingo. Today you're eating the dog's remnant. Yes, that leftover meat he licked and spat out last night." Nena burst into laughter. "Yes, let her eat it. Bingo's food is even better than her face." Chioma's eyes filled with tears, but before she could speak, her small fists clenched. "I'm not a dog," she shouted. The table went silent for a second. Then suddenly, Nena grabbed Chioma's hair. "Say that again, spoilt brat!" Chioma screamed and pushed her back. Bread flew into the air, juice spilled, plates crashed to the ground. The two girls fought like cats on fire, screaming, pulling hair, rolling under the table. Amaka rushed forward and slapped Chioma across the face. "You little witch, you dare lay hands on my child in this house?" Chioma fell to the floor, holding her cheek in shock. Just then, Calvin appeared at the stairwell. "Amaka!" he barked. Everyone froze. Calvin stepped in. His face looked tired, broken, but his voice was still heavy with command. "What's going on here?" Amaka crossed her arms, lips twitching with fake calm. "Ask your daughter. She's gone wild. She wants to fight like her mother did." Calvin's eyes snapped to Chioma. "Is this true?" Before Chioma could speak, Amaka cut in with fake tears. "I'm trying, Calvin. I'm trying to love her, but she's a demon. Just like that woman whose photo you kiss every night." Chioma stood up, eyes swollen, clothes torn. She whispered, trembling, "I just asked for food." Calvin looked between his wife and his daughter. He didn't say a word. He turned around and walked back upstairs. Chioma's heart shattered. That day she didn't eat, but she learned something more bitter than hunger. The war had started, and she was all alone. Weeks passed. And just like that, the house that once held music, laughter, and bedtime stories became a graveyard of memories. Chioma watched her father fade like a candle in the wind. Every day he grew weaker. He no longer came downstairs. His voice became faint, his eyes dimmed, his smile gone. One day he was coughing so much that even the walls echoed his pain. Doctors came and went, shaking their heads like the sickness had no name. Amaka, she didn't care. She just walked around the house in makeup and jelly, acting like the Queen of Death. And then, exactly 1 year from the day she barged in with her luggage and lies on Chioma's 6th birthday, her father gave up. It was raining. Thunder roared. The sky mourned before Chioma even understood what was happening. She sat beside him, her tiny hands shaking as she held his weak fingers. "Daddy, please don't go." Calvin turned to her, eyes filled with tears and love. He pulled her in, his last strength, and hugged her so tightly like he was trying to give her all he had left in that one hug. Then he kissed her forehead slowly and whispered in her ear, "Chioma, my angel, if you can fight for it, everything belongs to you." Tears rolled down his cheeks, he smiled faintly, and right there, in her arms, he died. Chioma screamed, "No, Daddy, wake up, please, wake up!" But he didn't move, he didn't breathe. He was gone, gone forever. Before she could even process what just happened, Amaka let out a sharp, cold laugh. Not a sad laugh, not a broken one, but a victorious, wicked one. She clapped slowly, her voice cold like a snake in winter. "Well, well, look who finally left the building. Good riddance." Chioma looked at her in horror, soaked in tears, still hugging her father's lifeless body. "Don't look at me like that," Amaka sneered. "You thought this was your house, that this was your life? Oh, darling, your fairy tale is over." Then she leaned down close and whispered with venom, "I know better than to allow you fight for anything." She stood up, grabbed Chioma by the arm like she was trash, and dragged her across the marble floor, her knees scraping, her screams ignored. "Where are you taking me? Leave me! Let me stay with my daddy!" But Amaka didn't stop. She opened the old dusty door behind the house, the storeroom. Dark, cold. Spiderwebs in every corner. With no mercy, she flung Chioma inside and slammed the door. Click, she locked it. "Stay there," Amaka hissed. "You want to fight? Fight the rats." And just like that, that was the last time Chioma stepped foot inside her own house. On her 6th birthday, she lost everything. Her father, her freedom, her childhood, and the mansion? It continued like she never existed. The first night in the storeroom, Chioma thought it was a nightmare. She kept waiting for someone to open the door. Maybe her father would wake up, maybe he would walk in with that warm smile and say, "Sorry, my angel, bad dream." But the door stayed shut, and the night grew colder. The storeroom was nothing like a room, just a box of darkness. No light, no window, just cobwebs, dust, and dead silence. The only sound she heard was her own crying. Her tiny voice echoed through the walls as she whispered, "Daddy, where are you? Please, come and carry me." But there was no answer. There were no toys, no food, no blanket. Only an old torn sack in one corner and a rusty paint bucket someone once used as a stool. She sat there hugging her knees. The cold bit her skin. The floor was hard like stone. The air smelled like rotten cloth and rat urine. And the rats? Oh, they came freely, like landlords checking on a new tenant. Sometimes they ran across her feet. Sometimes she heard them fighting behind the sacks. She screamed at first, then cried, then stayed silent. On the 3rd day, her stomach roared. The hunger was like fire in her belly. She licked her dry lips. She even tried chewing the end of her own dress. When she could no longer hold it, she knocked on the door with her weak fists. Knock, knock, knock. "Mummy Amaka, I'm sorry, I'm hungry, please." Nothing. Hours later, the door creaked, hope lit in Chioma's eyes. But Amaka didn't come with food. She came with a dog bowl, and in it, leftover bones, smelly ones. She dropped it on the floor and said, "You're lucky Bingo didn't finish it. Eat fast before I change my mind." Chioma stared at the bowl. She shook her head slowly, tears flooding her face. "I can't eat that!" Slap! Amaka's palm landed hard on her cheek. "Then die of hunger," she spat. "Your mother must be proud of the weak thing she gave birth to." The door slammed again. Chioma sat there, the bowl in front of her, the bones, crawling with flies, her cheek burning from the slap. Her heart? breaking into a million pieces. That night she didn't sleep. She just laid there, whispering her father's words again and again. If you can fight for it, everything belongs to you. But how do you fight when you're 6, alone, locked in darkness, and the only birthday gift you got was a prison? Meanwhile, in the mansion, while Chioma cried herself to sleep on the cold floor, while her tiny body shivered in the dark, while rats marched freely like soldiers on patrol, life outside the storeroom had never been better. For Amaka and her daughter Nena, it was a new dawn. The very next morning after Calvin's burial, the music in the house changed, literally. Amaka danced in the living room in her lace wrapper, twisting her waist like a happy widow on honeymoon. "Alexa, play Chop My Money, I deserve it," she shouted, laughing with a wineglass in hand. She wore Calvin's gold wristwatch like a trophy. She picked calls from the family lawyer with a fake British accent, and she redecorated the house, removing every picture of Chioma's mother. As for Nena, she got a new room, Chioma's room. She bounced on Chioma's old bed like it was her throne, tossed out the books, broke the dollhouse, and shouted, "Finally, this is what I deserve." Even Bingo, the dog, barked less. He knew the queen of the house had changed. The maids, Anita and Alexa, were no longer careless or slow. No more phone scrolling in the kitchen. No more gossiping in the laundry room. They had seen what happened to Chioma. They watched her get dragged away, heard the lock turn, and saw the light in her eyes fade. They didn't want to be next. Every cup they served was polished. Every plate was spotless. "Good morning, Ma." "Yes, Ma. No, Ma. Thank you, Ma." Their smiles were fake, but their fear was real. Even the gateman, Musa, who used to doze off in the afternoons and let visitors sign fake names, now stood like a soldier, eyes wide open. If Amaka sneezed, he jumped. If Nena coughed, he ran. Nobody wanted to be the next scapegoat, because in that house now power had changed hands. It was no longer a home, it was a kingdom. And Queen Amaka ruled with perfume, plastic smiles, and hidden poison. As for the storeroom, it stayed shut. No laughter, no sunlight, no sound, except when Chioma cried quietly or whispered her father's final words to the darkness. If you can fight for it, everything belongs to you. But outside, they were living, they were feasting, and they had completely erased her. Days turned into weeks. Weeks began to feel like months. Chioma didn't know what day it was anymore. There was no clock, no calendar, no sun, only shadows, silence, and slow breathing. She had cried until her tears dried. She had screamed until her voice cracked, and she had knocked on that door until her little knuckles bled. But no one answered. Sometimes she thought maybe she had died too, and this was the part of heaven where forgotten children waited. But then the rats would squeal, and the pain in her stomach would remind her she was very much alive. Every few days, Alexa would open the door slightly at night and toss in food scraps in a nylon bag, and whispered to her, "Chioma, please eat this. This is what I can sneak out. No plate, no spoon. Sometimes it was hot, sometimes it was sour, but it was all she had." And Chioma ate it, like a prisoner, like an animal. But every time she chewed, she whispered something in her heart. "I will not die here." She said it over and over. At first it sounded like a lie, but soon it began to sound like a promise. Her body was getting thinner, her dresses had holes, her hair was tangled, her fingers weak. But deep inside, a fire had started. The same fire her father had lit with his final words, "If you can fight for it, everything belongs to you." She didn't know how to fight. She was just a child, a forgotten child in a locked storeroom. But she started watching, listening. Every time someone came near the door, she pressed her ear against the wood. She memorized footsteps. She noticed which key made what sound. She knew when it was the maid, when it was Amaka, when it was safe to cry, when it was better to stay quiet. She began to sharpen her mind, because her body had no power, but her mind was still hers. And Chioma decided, "They will not kill me here. One day this door will open, and I won't be the weak girl they left behind. She waited and listened and whispered her mother's name, though she didn't know what it was. And in that darkness, though she looked like a forgotten child, a lioness was quietly learning how to roar. Years passed. The mansion became colder, richer, louder, but never warmer. Nenna had grown, not just in age, but in pride, beauty, and venom. She was now a teenager, tall and striking. Her skin glowed, her eyes burned, her words as sharp as broken glass. She no longer acted like a princess. She walked like a queen who had never lost a war. And beside her stood her mother, Amaka, who now dressed like a woman with nothing to fear and everything to protect. Together they ruled Calvin's company, the same company he built with sweat, the same one Chioma used to visit as a child, holding her daddy's hand. Now, it belonged to her enemies. Because before Calvin died, Amaka had tricked him into signing papers that looked like hospital forms, but were actually a will, a forged will. One that read, I, Calvin Obiora, willingly pass all assets, shares and property to my beloved wife Amaka and her daughter Nenna. No one dared question it. The lawyer had been paid, the staff too scared. The truth buried with Calvin. At the office, Nenna walked through the glass doors like a storm. Her heels clicked like warning shots. Her voice echoed like a judge in court. Why is this file still on my desk? Are you deaf or slow? Next time you argue with me, go and apply for a security job. She didn't listen. She commanded. She didn't negotiate. She threatened. And the staff? They gave up. The older managers who once worked with Calvin stopped offering suggestions. The board of directors, they nodded quietly in meetings, because after all, what could they do? Calvin willed everything to them. And so they ruled, with perfume, power, poison, and pride. Amaka became the madam of all madams. She opened expensive branches, built shopping malls, hosted fashion parties, and made sure every photo of Calvin's first wife, Chioma's mother, was destroyed, deleted, forgotten. She even told staff, there was never any first daughter. If anyone brings up her name again, they'll be hearing from my lawyer. And behind all the glam and glitter was a rotting truth. They had buried a living child. They had robbed a dead man. They had built their throne on lies. But what they didn't know was this. The girl they buried wasn't dead. She was growing too. Just not like Nenna, with gold and gowns. Chioma had grown into a shadow of her former self. Her once glowing skin was now dark, dry and rough. Her hair? A long, tangled nest that looked like it had never felt a comb. Her nails were cracked. Her dress had turned to rags, and the smell from her skin, even the rats kept their distance. She looked like someone pulled out from a gutter behind a market dump. She hadn't seen soap or water in years. No mirror, no sunlight, no fresh air, but somehow she decided to survive. Chioma was growing, in silence, in pain, in patience. And while Amaka and Nenna sharpened their tongues, Chioma sharpened her spirit. Because in the dusty corners of that store, buried beneath old boxes and forgotten furniture, were books. Some were covered in cobwebs, some had half-eaten pages from rats, some had her father's handwriting on the cover. And day by day, night by night, Chioma read every single one. At first, she read to escape. Then she read to understand. Then she read to prepare. She read motivational books, how broken people built empires. She read business books, balance sheets, negotiations, market strategy. She read political books, how power works, how people rise, how people fall, and slowly she changed. Not outside, but inside. Her body remained broken, but her mind became sharp like glass. Her spirit became bold, her soul became unshakable. In that darkness, she found her father again through his notes, his scribbles, his old company files. She studied him, she studied Amaka, she studied the world. Nobody remembered her name. Nobody spoke it. Amaka had long erased her from memory. Nenna never once asked, where is Chioma? They believed she had gone mad or died long ago. But one person hadn't forgotten her completely. Alexa, the second maid. She was young when it all started. But now, as a young woman, she had grown in fear and silence. Yet every week, or sometimes two, she would pass a nylon bag of food to her. Nothing much, maybe dry Gary and a bottle of water. Sometimes cold jollof. But to Chioma it was life, and every single time Chioma whispered to that nylon, "Thank you, Alexa. May your heart never rot like theirs." She didn't know if Alexa heard her. She didn't know if Alexa cared. But in a world that had forgotten her, one name still came with food, and because of that, Chioma survived. And as the years passed, she began to plan. Because if they thought they buried a girl, they forgot some seeds only grow in darkness. One fateful day, the chandelier sparkled overhead, jazz music humming softly from the speakers as laughter echoed through the mansion's grand living room. Nena and Amaka stood in front of the large glass window, champagne glasses raised, clinking with pride. To bigger deals they just made, Nena grinned wickedly. To power, money, and silence, Amaka added, swirling her drink. They laughed. They danced. That day was pure victory for them. Another shady business deal had just been signed, sealed, and was about to be delivered. The company Calvin built with honesty was now a pipeline for secrets, bribes, and silent threats. They danced in their silk robes, careless and cruel, and laughed. Nina said, "I think we are more than billionaires now." But a few months later, it was a regular morning. Breakfast was heavy with laughter and omelettes. The maids stood silently in corners, too scared to breathe loudly. The gateman, head lowered, entered the dining area slowly. "Madam," he cleared his throat, "some people are here to see you." Amaka wiped her mouth gently with a white napkin and smiled. "Send them in. We always have visitors." But when they walked in, 4 stern men in black, 2 women in security uniforms, something in the air changed. The man in front showed a badge. "We're from the Narcotics Investigation Bureau. We've received information that this premises is being used for drug trafficking. We need to search the house." The champagne almost fell from Nena's hands. "Excuse me?" she scoffed. "You must be in the wrong place." Amaka snapped. "This is the home of the late Calvin Obioma, a respectable name." "We know," one of the women responded coldly, "but the law still applies." After tense arguing and power-throwing, the officials were finally let in. They searched everywhere, the kitchen, rooms, wardrobes, ceilings. At first they found nothing, but then one man walked into the study. His hands grazed over the bookshelf, tapped at the walls until... click. A hidden compartment behind the safe. "There's a briefcase here," he called out. Amaka's face changed. She stepped forward quickly. "Don't touch that. It contains confidential documents. Very sensitive. Our business partner left it here and said no one should open it until his return." The officials exchanged looks. "That may be so," the lead officer replied, "but we'll have to confirm it." As the case clicked open, gasps filled the room. Wrapped in brown and silver plastic, carefully arranged, packs and packs of solid white substances. "Madam," the officer held one up, "would you like to explain this?" No, this has to be a mistake," Nena stammered, eyes darting. "I've never seen this in my life," Amaka cried. "Someone planted this." But the team wasn't done. They continued their search down the stairs, through the servants' quarters, until they reached a dusty iron door. The storeroom. "We need this open." Amaka froze. Nena's eyes widened. "That's just where we keep junk." But the door creaked open. The smell was foul. Rot dust. Forgotten years. And there, huddled in the corner, hair like dead vines hanging around her face, skin dull and grey, fingers bony, legs bruised from years of crawling on concrete, sat Chioma. She didn't move. She just blinked slowly. Her eyes had no light. Her lips were cracked. She looked like a spirit who forgot how to die. One of the officers stepped back. "Who is this?" Amaka panicked. She's a sick girl. She's not in her right mind. She wandered in years ago." "Liar," whispered the youngest maid, Alexa, who had followed from behind. Tears fell freely from her cheeks. "She's not a stranger," Alexa cried. That's Mr. Calvin's only child. That's Chioma. Gasps. Everything stopped. Nenna's mouth dropped. That's not possible. But Chioma, though weak, slowly raised her eyes to meet Nenna's, and for the first time in years her lips moved. She whispered, "I remember everything." The silence that followed felt like an earthquake had held its breath. Amaka stumbled back, and somewhere in the middle of shame and horror, justice woke up. Amaka's lips trembled as she stepped forward, blocking the official who still held the bag of drugs in his hands. "Please," she stammered. "This is a mistake. Let me call our business partner. He's the one who left that briefcase here. I swear to you, it's not ours." The official gave a small nod, unimpressed but willing to watch her squirm. With shaky hands, Amaka pulled out her phone and dialed the number. Ring. Then silence. She blinked. She dialed again. "The number you are trying to reach is currently switched off." No, Amaka whispered. "Not now." She turned to Nenna. "Try your phone. Maybe it's a network issue." Nenna's hands fumbled with her screen. She dialed quickly. The same voice, the same cold message. Switched off. "Try the office line," Amaka gasped. "They tried that too. No response." "His email! Try his email," Nenna shouted, her voice rising in panic. She opened her inbox, but the last message from him was a week ago. She replied, "Undeliverable." Her heart dropped. A cold sweat washed over her skin. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Amaka cried desperately. "Check everything." Gone. All profiles wiped clean. No last seen, no mutual friends. It was as though he had never existed. Then it hit them. They had been scammed. Nenna staggered back and collapsed into the armchair like someone punched her chest. Amaka stood frozen, phone in hand, breathing hard. Her throat was dry, her legs weak, her voice lost. The officials didn't say a word. They just watched with folded arms. Amaka whispered, almost to herself now, "We gave him so much money for this deal." Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor, clutching her head. Nenna started to cry, loud, ugly sobs with shame and helplessness. The official gave a cold nod. Pack them. That was it. No more silk gowns, no more morning smoothies or travel plans, no more deals, no more business, no more power, only shattered dreams, handcuffs and disgrace. Meanwhile, Chioma had been rushed to the hospital by one of the investigators who found her. She was not mad. She wasn't sick in the head, but she was badly malnourished, extremely dehydrated and emotionally unstable. Her hair was tangled like a forgotten weed. Her nails were overgrown, her skin pale and dull, but her mind clear, sharp, determined. Doctors said if they had found her any later, she might have died of organ failure. But the girl had a spirit that refused to go down. She said thank you for every drip, smiled at every nurse, and wrote with every energy left in her, even from the hospital bed. She didn't beg for pity, she just wanted to live, to walk again, to rise again. The girl they locked in a storeroom for years had returned, not as a ghost, but as a storm, and the story was just beginning. But for Amaka and Nenna, in their desperation to clear their names and avoid jail time, Amaka and her daughter made a reckless decision. They sold everything. The company Calvin built with sweat and brilliance, sold. The real estate shares, the warehouse, the luxurious cars, and even the antique house. Gone. All in the name of settling the scandal, buying freedom, and investing in what they believed was their ticket to escape and start over in another country. After a while, they were eventually bailed out and regained their freedom, but all they had is gone. Everything is gone. For the first time in a long time, Amaka cried without control. Her hands shook, her mouth tasted bitter with regret. Nenna couldn't believe it. She screamed at the walls. She smashed a mirror. She pulled her own hair, yelling, "No, no, no, this can't be happening. We were supposed to be untouchable." Just a moment ago, we were richer than the billionaires. They were now homeless. No company, no house, no staff, no maids. Not even the loyal gateman stayed. He left quietly the next day. A few days later, the morning sun poured through the hospital window, warm and soft on Chioma's face. She sat up, her frame still weak but her back straight. Her eyes no longer held just pain. Now they held purpose. Alexa sat beside her, feeding her updates like a news anchor. "They've been disgraced," she whispered. "Your stepmother and Nena, everything, gone. The fake business partner disappeared with all their money. People are laughing at them now." Chioma smiled faintly, her lips still dry but her pride restored. Alexa reached for her hand. "Chioma, you've won without lifting a finger." Chioma's eyes slowly turned toward the window. "No," she said softly, "I haven't won yet. There's one place I must go today." She turned to the doctor. "Please, discharge me. I'll return for the final injection. But right now, I need to visit somewhere in town." The doctor hesitated, but seeing the light in her eyes, the strength rising like morning sun, he nodded. "She's stronger than most people we treat here," he said. "Let her go." Alexa ran home and returned with one of her own dresses, a simple red gown and flat black shoes. A nurse smiled and handed Chioma a wig. It was curly, soft, and covered the years of tangled pain. "You look like someone who has a throne to collect," the nurse said. Chioma smiled again, this time wider. She stepped out of the hospital that morning not as a patient, but as the rightful heir to everything stolen from her. Later that day, Chioma entered the bank quietly, but every head turned as she walked in. She looked nothing like the forgotten girl in the storeroom. Now she moved with silent power, slow, graceful, intentional. "I need to see the bank manager," she said. "Your name, please?" The receptionist asked. Chioma leaned in, her voice clear. "Chioma Obioma, daughter of Mr. Calvin Obioma." Gasps filled the room. Whispers followed her footsteps as she was led to the top floor. Inside the manager's office, a woman in her late 50s, Mrs. Catherine, looked up from her desk. Her glasses slipped slightly when she saw her. "Ah!" she gasped, rising to her feet. I thought you were." Chioma raised one hand. "You thought I was dead," she said quietly. "A lot of people did." The woman nodded, her eyes full of shock and guilt. "Your father? I'm so sorry. I heard the news. I always suspected something was wrong. He was poisoned slowly, wasn't he?" Chioma blinked back the tears threatening her glassy eyes. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Mrs. Catherine sighed. "Your father loved you. He meant well. He told me everything before he passed." She walked to the shelf and pulled out a long brown file. In here are all the original documents of his properties, locally and internationally. Shares, deeds, offshore accounts, stocks, everything is intact. Chioma nodded. "He told me." "And," Mrs. Catherine added, "there's a baby account your father opened in your name years ago. Millions were deposited, protected with 3 layers of security." "I'm ready to claim it," Chioma said calmly. "I also want the company and all his assets returned. I have the original will, and his new lawyer is already in court." Weeks later, the news spread like wildfire. Chioma Obioma wins legal battle. Stolen empire returns to rightful heir. Amaka and Nena face charges for fraud, child abuse, and illegal possession. All Calvin's properties were restored. All illegal sales were reversed. The business returned to her hands. Chioma stood in the boardroom one morning, looking around at the same staff who once bowed to Amaka. Now they stood, heads lowered, silent. She didn't shout. She didn't insult. She only said, "From now on, this company is what it was always meant to be, honest, excellent, and human. If you're with me, stay. If not, this is your exit." Nobody moved, and in that silence, Chioma finally sat on her father's seat, not just as the owner, but as the daughter of a king and the survivor of a prison. Months later, Chioma stepped out of the bulletproof SUV as 4 well-dressed personal security guards in black suits flanked her. The iron gate of the Women's Correctional Center creaked open. The officers saluted as she walked through, confident, radiant, untouchable. Inside the visiting room, 2 weak figures shuffled in, their prison uniforms hanging on their now bony frames like faded shadows of their former selves. Amaka and her daughter Nena. They looked nothing like the women who once ruled a company with an iron fist. Their eyes were hollow, faces pale, pride gone. When they saw Chioma, they froze like statues carved by regret. Chioma sat gracefully, crossed her legs, and looked them in the eye. Her voice was calm, but behind every word was fire. My father once told me on his sick bed that you, Amaka, were my mother's best friend. Amaka's lips trembled. He said you were inseparable until jealousy turned your heart black because she married a rich man, and you couldn't even trace who got you pregnant. Amaka looked down in shame. Nena's eyes welled up. They told you not to abort that baby. They begged you. But instead of gratitude, you repaid their love with betrayal, unspeakable cruelty. Chioma's voice cracked slightly, but she didn't break. She continued, my father, in his dying breath, said, if you can fight for it, it's all yours. Those words became my anchor. She stood slowly. For 16 years I fought. I fought through tears, through lies, through near death. And today, I own everything. I carry my parents' legacy with pride. Chioma walked closer. The chains on Amaka's wrists clinked. I will visit you from time to time. After all, this prison is your forever home. Amaka burst into tears. Nena turned her face to the wall and sobbed. But Chioma didn't flinch. She turned around and walked out, head high, shoulders tall, into the sunlight waiting to crown her. Her guards followed behind as she stepped into her car. Chioma wasn't just her parents' daughter anymore. She was the legacy herself, and the world would never forget her name. Hello, besties. What a journey from betrayal, poison and prison to justice, victory and legacy. Chioma's story reminds us that no matter how dark the tunnel gets, light is always waiting at the end, if you fight for it. Would you have survived what Chioma went through? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share and follow for more powerful stories. And as always, stay strong, stay kind, and never stop fighting for what's yours. Love you, besties. Bye for now.